Let's continue looking at history of Iran by looking at Persians, their origin and how they created Achaemenid's empire, one of the most impressive empires through history. Don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't lose next episodes. Who were the Persians? Long before the mighty Achaemenid Empire stretched from India to the Mediterranean, the Persians were just one of many Iranian tribes scattered across the vast Iranian plateau. They called themselves the Parsa, and their homeland, Parsua or Persis, was a rugged land in today's southwestern Iran, in the region we now call Fars province. The Persians were Indo-Iranian people, cousins of the Medes, who had settled further north on the Iranian plateau. While the Medes established themselves around Ecbatana, modern Hamadan, the Persians lived in a harsher, more mountainous environment near the Persian Gulf. This homeland shaped them. They became tough, resourceful, and deeply tribal. Their society was built on kinship bonds, loyalty to clan leaders, and respect for warriors and priests. At first, the Persians were not an empire-building people. For centuries, they were vassals to stronger neighbors, most notably the Medes. The Medes had risen as the first powerful Iranian kingdom, uniting their own tribes and playing a decisive role in overthrowing the Assyrian Empire in the late 7th century BCE. With their strong cavalry and central position in the Zagros Mountains, the Medes dominated much of western Iran and demanded tribute from the Persians. But this relationship was not one of equals. The Persians were considered the junior partner, supplying warriors, horses, and resources to the Median kings. For them, Median rule was both a burden and a blessing. They had protection against external enemies like the Babylonians or steppe nomads, but they also remained politically constrained. Culturally, though, Persians and Medes were very close. They spoke closely related languages, shared Indo-Iranian traditions, and followed similar religious practices, with early forms of Zoroastrianism shaping their worldview, a belief system centered on the cosmic struggle between truth, Asha, and falsehood, Druj. By the mid-6th century BCE, everything would change. Out of these lesser Persians arose a bold leader, Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great. In a daring move, he would turn the Persian-Median relationship upside down, overthrowing his Median overlord, King Astyages, and transforming the Persians from subjects into rulers of the greatest empire the world had yet seen. In the next episode, we look at Cyrus the Great, his amazing career, and how he created his vast empire. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's continue looking at history of Iran. In previous episode, we talked about Persians and their relationship to Medes. In this episode, we look at Cyrus the Great, the founder of Achaemenid Empire and one of the most influential and important kings of history. Don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you don't lose next episodes.
The life of Cyrus the Great. The rise of Cyrus the Great. By the mid-6th century BCE, the Persians were still considered a lesser people under the shadow of the mighty Median Empire. But among them was a man destined to change the world, Cyrus II, later called Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was born around 600 BCE in the Persian heartland of Anshan. He came from the Akhaemenid clan, a noble line of Persian chiefs. Ancient traditions even wrap his birth in legend. Some say his grandfather, the Median king Astyages, dreamt that his daughter's son would overthrow him. Fearing prophecy, Astyages allegedly ordered the infant killed. But fate intervened, the child survived, raised quietly until his destiny revealed itself. Whether or not this legend is true, one thing is certain: Cyrus grew up in a world where the Persians were subordinate, yet restless. By the 550s BCE, he rallied Persian tribes under his leadership, uniting them in defiance of Median rule. This was no small feat. The Medes were experienced warriors, with cavalry and fortified strongholds. But Cyrus brought something new: vision, charisma, and a reputation for fairness. When rebellion broke out, Astyages marched his Median army against his own grandson. But the tide turned quickly. According to ancient sources, many Median nobles defected to Cyrus, tired of Astyages' tyranny. By 550 BCE, the unthinkable happened: Cyrus entered Ecbatana, the Median capital. The empire of the Medes collapsed, and the Persians, once vassals, had become masters. This was the birth of the Achaemenid Empire. Yet Cyrus did not destroy the Median legacy. Instead, he absorbed it. He kept Median officials, integrated their army, and fused Persian and Median traditions into a single imperial system. From now on, Persians and Medes would rule side by side, as partners in empire. Cyrus was more than just a conqueror. He was a statesman who understood that an empire could not survive by force alone. Unlike the Assyrians, who had ruled through fear and brutality, Cyrus built his power on respect, tolerance, and alliances. This would become the defining character of the Akhaemenid dynasty. And this was only the beginning. With Media under his control, Cyrus looked outward to the fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia, to the ancient cities of Babylonia, and eventually eastward towards Central Asia. The world was about to witness a conqueror unlike any it had ever seen. Cyrus' rebellion against the Medes. In the middle of the 6th century BCE, the Iranian plateau was ruled by the Medes, a powerful people whose king, Astyages, held sway from his capital at Ecbatana. Among their subjects were the Persians, a smaller tribe from the rugged land of Anshan in the south. The Persians were hardy mountain folk, organized in clans, skilled in war, and proud of their traditions. But for generations, they had lived as vassals, sending tribute and warriors to their Median overlords. Out of this humble background came a man who would change the destiny of his people, Cyrus, son of the Akhaemenid clan. Ancient storytellers wrapped his birth in legend. They say that Astyages had a dream foretelling that his grandson would one day overthrow him. Fearing the prophecy, he ordered the infant killed. But the child survived, hidden away, until his true heritage was revealed. Whether fact or myth, the story reflects how people later saw Cyrus as a man chosen by fate to challenge the great king. By the 550s BCE, Cyrus had become leader of the Persians. He was young, ambitious, and bold. Where others had accepted the Persians' lowly status, he offered something radical: freedom. His call for independence sparked a movement, and soon the tribes of Persis rallied to his banner. Astyages, outraged, could not let rebellion go unanswered. He gathered the Median army, one of the strongest in the region, and marched against his grandson. On paper, the Persians had little chance. The Medes were seasoned warriors, with a powerful cavalry, while Cyrus commanded a smaller, less experienced force. But what Astyages did not see was that many of his own nobles had turned against him. Tired of his harsh rule, they secretly sided with Cyrus. One of his most trusted generals, Harpagus, even betrayed him on the battlefield. The decisive clash came in 550 BCE. Astyages' army crumbled as defections spread. The Medes, once masters of the plateau, were defeated by the very people they had ruled. Astyages himself was captured, and Cyrus marched into Ecbatana in triumph. What happened next set Cyrus apart from conquerors before him. He did not destroy the Medes or strip them of power. Instead, he embraced them. Median nobles kept their positions, their warriors joined his armies, and their traditions were woven together with those of the Persians. In this way, Cyrus transformed victory into unity. The Persians and Medes, once ruler and subject, became partners in a new kind of empire. Thus, with the fall of the Medes, the Akhaemenid Empire was born. It was the first step in a career that would see Cyrus challenge the great kingdoms of Lydia and Babylonia, and build the foundations of one of history's greatest empires. Cyrus and the conquest of Lydia. After defeating the Medes, Cyrus was no longer a minor tribal leader. He was now the master of a vast new kingdom, uniting Persians and Medes under one crown. But his ambitions reached further, and beyond the Iranian plateau lay one of the richest kingdoms of the ancient world, Lydia. Lydia, in western Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, was ruled by the famous King Croesus, a man whose wealth was so legendary that his very name became a byword for riches. Gold flowed from the sands of the Pactolus River, and the kingdom's capital, Sardis, dazzled with splendor. Croesus commanded powerful armies and, through alliances, had secured ties with Egypt, Babylon, and even the rising city-states of Greece. To Croesus, Cyrus' sudden rise was alarming. A new empire had appeared on Lydia's eastern frontier, and he feared the Persians would upset the balance of power. But Croesus was no cautious man. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, he consulted the oracle of Delphi before making his move. The oracle gave a cryptic reply: if Croesus crosses the Halys River, he will destroy a great empire. Convinced this meant victory, Croesus prepared for war. In 547 BCE, he marched east and clashed with Cyrus' army on the plains of Cappadocia, near the Halys River. The battle was fierce, but inconclusive. Croesus, believing the campaign season over, withdrew his forces to Sardis for the winter, expecting to rebuild his strength and call on his allies. But Cyrus thought differently. He pursued Croesus with astonishing speed, refusing to wait for spring. By the time Croesus realized what had happened, the Persians were at his gates. The decisive battle came outside Sardis. The Lydian cavalry, feared across Anatolia, charged against Cyrus' forces. But Cyrus had prepared a clever trick. He placed camels at the front of his army, knowing their smell would terrify the Lydian horses. The charge faltered, chaos spread through the ranks, and the Persians surged forward. Croesus was defeated. Sardis fell after only a brief siege, and the richest king in the world was at Cyrus' mercy. Ancient stories say that Croesus was placed on a pyre to be burned, only to be spared at the last moment when he cried out to the gods, a sign of Cyrus' famed clemency. Whether true or not, what mattered was this: Lydia was now part of the Akhaemenid realm. Cyrus had conquered not only a kingdom, but also a bridge to the Western world. With Lydia came control of the Greek cities of Ionia along the Aegean coast. For the first time, Persians and Greeks would clash, a relationship that would echo through centuries of history. By defeating Croesus, Cyrus had proven that his empire was not a fragile accident, but a power that could humble the richest and most confident kings of the age. And yet, his greatest triumph still lay ahead, in the heart of Mesopotamia, against the ancient empire of Babylon. Cyrus and the conquest of Babylon. By the mid-6th century BCE, Cyrus the Great had already overturned the order of the Near East. He had defeated the Medes, humbled the Lydians, and extended Persian power from the mountains of Iran to the Aegean Sea. But one challenge remained: the greatest and most ancient empire of them all, Babylon. For over 1,000 years, Babylon had stood as a jewel of Mesopotamia, with mighty walls, towering temples, and a proud legacy that stretched back to Hammurabi. By Cyrus' time, it was ruled by Nabonidus, a king whose reign had stirred unrest among his own people. Nabonidus was deeply religious, but in ways that alienated the powerful priests of Babylon. He favored the moon god Sin over Marduk, the city's chief deity, and spent long years away from the capital on campaigns in Arabia. For many Babylonians, their king seemed distant and indifferent to their traditions. Cyrus recognized an opportunity. Unlike other conquerors, he did not present himself as a destroyer, but as a liberator. His propaganda was clear: he was chosen by Marduk himself to restore proper worship and free the people from Nabonidus' misrule. This was a brilliant stroke. The Persians had found a way to turn Babylon's own traditions into a weapon. In 539 BCE, Cyrus' army advanced toward Babylon. At Opis, on the Tigris River, the Persians clashed with the Babylonian forces and crushed them. With the road open, they marched south. Babylon was considered impregnable, its walls said to be impossible to breach. Yet within weeks, it too fell. Ancient accounts differ on how this happened. Herodotus and Xenophon tell dramatic stories of the Persians diverting the Euphrates River, slipping into the city through its waterways during a festival night. Whether or not this tale is true, the reality was the same: Babylon opened its gates, and Cyrus entered the city as its new master. But what set Cyrus apart was what came next. Instead of plundering the city, he declared himself the protector of Babylon's people and gods. His famous proclamation, inscribed on the Cyrus cylinder, announced that he had been chosen by Marduk to bring peace, restore temples, and allow displaced peoples to return to their homelands. Among them were the Jews, exiled in Babylon, whom Cyrus permitted to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. To his new subjects, Cyrus was not a conqueror but a restorer. His conquest of Babylon marked a turning point in ancient history. The world had seen empires of fear, like the Assyrians, but now it saw an empire built on tolerance and respect for traditions. By seizing Babylon, Cyrus added Mesopotamia to his growing realm and became the undisputed ruler of the Near East. His empire now stretched from the Aegean to the Persian Gulf, from the highlands of Iran to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen, and it was still growing. Cyrus the Great had forged not only a vast realm, but also a new idea. A new idea of an empire, one that could unite diverse peoples under a common rule without erasing their identities. It was this vision that would make the Achaemenid Empire endure long after his. The last campaign of Cyrus the Great. By the end of his reign, Cyrus the Great ruled the largest empire the world had ever known, from the Aegean Sea to the mountains of Central Asia. Yet even the greatest conquerors are not immune to fate. In his final years, Cyrus turned his gaze east, toward the vast steppes beyond the Sir Daria River, where nomadic tribes roamed. Among them were the fierce Massagetæ, led by their warrior queen Tamiris. These tribes were skilled horsemen, hardened by the steppe, and fiercely protective of their freedom. According to Herodotus, Cyrus sought to bring them under his rule. At first, he tried diplomacy, even proposing marriage to Tamiris, but she refused. War soon followed. In the first clash, the Persians captured her son, who took his own life in captivity. Enraged, Tamiris vowed vengeance. The decisive battle came soon after. The Massagetæ lured the Persians into a trap, overwhelming them with cavalry and archers. Cyrus, the conqueror of Media, Lydia, and Babylon, fell in battle. His body, it is said, was found on the field. Legend claims that Queen Tamiris ordered his head plunged into a skin filled with blood, declaring, "Drink your fill, Cyrus, of the blood you thirsted for." Whether this story is fact or legend, one truth remains: Cyrus never returned from the steppes. His empire, however, endured. His body was carried back to Pasargadae, his capital, and laid to rest in a simple but majestic tomb, a monument that still stands today. Cyrus' death marked the end of a conqueror's journey, but not the end of his vision. The empire he built would outlast him, carried on by his heirs, and remembered for centuries as one of the greatest in history.
Thank you for watching this video. In next video we look at what happens to Achaemenid Empire after Cyrus the Great passes away. Don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss next episodes. We continue the tale of Achaemenid Empire after Cyrus and, in a way, the tragic lives of his sons. But before that, let's take a look how the empire was managed and the life of people in the empire.
The Achaemenid Empire: structure, life, art, and Persian culture. Imagine a world 2,500 years ago. A vast land stretching from the valleys of the Indus to the shores of the Mediterranean, from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia. This was the Achaemenid Empire, the first super-empire of history, founded by Cyrus the Great. But how did it work? How did one king control millions of people, hundreds of nations, and countless cultures, and keep it all together? The structure of the empire. At the very top sat the King of Kings, the Shahanshah. His word was law, his authority unquestioned, and he was seen as chosen by the gods. But the empire's success wasn't just about royal power. It was about building a system. The Persians divided their empire into large regions called satrapies, each ruled by a governor, or satrap. These satraps collected taxes, kept order, and protected trade. But they weren't left alone, the king always had his eyes on them. Royal inspectors, known as the king's eyes and ears, traveled the empire, checking for corruption, betrayal, or rebellion. Taxes flowed in from every corner: gold from Lydia, grain from Egypt, horses from Central Asia. But instead of crushing people with demands, the Persians tailored tribute to each region's ability. It was smart governance, fair enough to prevent revolts, strict enough to keep wealth pouring into the imperial treasury. To connect this massive empire, the Persians built an incredible road network, crowned by the Royal Road, nearly 3,000 kilometers long. Couriers could ride day and night, swapping horses at stations, carrying royal orders from one end of the empire to the other in just days. For ordinary people, it meant faster trade, safer travel, and a sense of being part of something much larger. And yet, the most brilliant part of the system was tolerance. Instead of forcing everyone to adopt Persian customs, the empire let people keep their own languages, laws, and gods. As long as you paid your taxes and stayed loyal, you were free. Life and culture of ordinary people. But what about daily life? What was it like to live inside the empire if you weren't a king or satrap? Most people were farmers, living in villages of mud brick homes, working fields of barley, wheat, and dates. In Persia itself, clever irrigation systems called qanats brought water from underground to make the desert bloom. Society had layers, nobles at the top, then craftsmen and merchants in bustling cities like Susa, Babylon, and Persepolis, and beneath them, the farmers and laborers who formed the empire's backbone. Slaves existed, often prisoners of war, but unlike in Greece or Rome, they weren't the main workforce. Culture was everywhere. The empire was a patchwork of peoples: Persians, Medes, Egyptians, Babylonians, Jews, Greeks, and more. Markets overflowed with goods from across the known world: spices, fine textiles, carved ivory, and painted pottery. In temples and shrines, different gods were worshipped freely, while the royal family honored Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrian belief. Life was simple, but not joyless. Families gathered around bread, lamb, onions, and wine or beer. Clothes were colorful, with long tunics and trousers that shocked the Greeks. And festivals, especially the New Year, Nowruz, brought music, dance, and processions of tribute bearers from every corner of the empire. Art and cultural environment. When people think of the Achaemenid Empire, they imagine kings, armies, and vast conquests. But there was another side to Persia, a world of breathtaking art, architecture, and cultural brilliance. A world designed not just to rule, but to impress, inspire, and bring unity to an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Nowhere is this clearer than at Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the empire. Rising out of the Persian plateau, its palaces and audience halls weren't just buildings, they were statements. Stone staircases carved with scenes of tribute bearers, massive columns topped with bulls and griffins, and endless reliefs of processions told a story. This was the empire of harmony, order, and loyalty. Unlike the brutal war scenes carved by the Assyrians before them, Persian art avoided images of cruelty. Instead, it showed dignity, respect, and balance. It wasn't about scaring people into obedience. It was about making them feel part of something larger. The Persians were also the first to create what we now call paradise. They designed walled gardens, called paradisa, filled with trees, flowers, and flowing water. These gardens weren't just beautiful, they symbolized life, order, and the triumph of culture over chaos. The empire was a cultural crossroads. Egyptian stone carvers, Mesopotamian sculptors, Greek craftsmen, and Central Asian nomadic artists all worked in Persian workshops. The result was a unique fusion: drinking vessels shaped like lions or eagles, textiles dyed in brilliant colors, golden jewelry crafted with incredible skill. Even languages blended. Royal inscriptions were written in multiple tongues, and Aramaic became the language of everyday administration, from Egypt to India. This meant that artists, merchants, and officials could communicate across vast distances, creating a truly cosmopolitan empire. Culture wasn't limited to kings and nobles. In villages and towns, ordinary people enjoyed music, dance, and storytelling. Markets overflowed with exotic goods: ivory from India, glass from Phoenicia, spices from Arabia. Banquets brought people together with bread, lamb, onions, and plenty of wine. Festivals like Nowruz, the New Year, filled the empire with celebration. At Persepolis, delegations from every corner of the realm gathered to present their gifts: gold, horses, rare animals, a living display of the empire's diversity. The culture of the Persians themselves. Beyond the empire's diversity, the Persians themselves had a distinctive culture that shaped everything around them. They spoke Old Persian, an Indo-Iranian language, though in administration Aramaic was widely used as a practical lingua franca. Royal inscriptions in Old Persian cuneiform proclaimed the king's glory, tying Persian identity to their imperial achievements. Religion was deeply tied to Zoroastrian tradition. The Persians worshipped Ahura Mazda, the god of truth, light, and order, and believed the world was a battlefield between truth, Asha, and lies, Druj. The King of Kings was seen not only as a ruler, but as a defender of cosmic order. Persian nobles were famous for their refined manners. Greek writers often described them as courteous, though sometimes they mocked them as soft. At court, strict etiquette was observed. Approaching the king required deep bows or even prostration, a sign of both political and sacred respect. clothing set Persians apart. They wore long robes, trousers, and soft leather boots, colorful garments decorated with patterns that shocked the Greeks, who preferred simplicity. Nobles often styled their beards in elegant curls, symbols of dignity and status. Food and feasting were central to Persian culture. Bread, lamb, dates, and dairy were staples, but nobles enjoyed lavish banquets with roasted meats and honey-sweetened wine. These feasts weren't just meals, they were political theater, showing generosity and cementing loyalty. Leisure and lifestyle reflected Persian values. Hunting lions and boars was a royal pastime, symbolizing courage and kingship. Horse riding and archery were considered essential skills, tied to the Persians' identity as warriors of the Iranian plateau. Music, flutes, lyres, and dances enlivened festivals and family gatherings alike. Perhaps the most striking cultural trait was Persian tolerance. They allowed conquered peoples to worship their gods, keep their languages, and preserve traditions. This wasn't just policy, it reflected their worldview that the empire was a cosmic order where many nations could coexist under Persian rule. So, the Achaemenid Empire wasn't held together by fear alone. It was built on organization, tolerance, art, and a vision of unity that stretched across continents. For the common farmer, it meant a predictable life. For the artist, it meant new opportunities. For the Persian noble, it meant defending truth, honor, and tradition. Together, they created one of history's most remarkable civilizations. And that's how the Achaemenid world worked, from the king of kings in Persepolis, to the farmer plowing his field, to the craftsman shaping gold, to the noble at a banquet. A civilization of power, art, and culture that still echoes through time.
Thank you for watching this episode. In the next episode, we'll go after Cyrus's sons and the tragedy that befell them. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. We looked at the culture and life of ordinary people in Achaemenid Empire in previous episode. Now let's continue our story with what happened after Cyrus the Great. Cambyses, Egypt, and the rise of Darius. When Cyrus the Great, the legendary founder of the Persian Empire, died in 530 BCE, his empire stretched from Asia Minor to the Indus Valley. But the question of succession would soon plunge Persia into intrigue, betrayal, and one of the most dramatic power struggles in ancient history. Cambyses II and the conquest of Egypt. Cambyses II, Cyrus' eldest son, inherited the throne. Determined to expand the empire further, he set his sights on Egypt, the last great independent power of the ancient Near East. In 525 BCE, Cambyses launched his invasion. At the Battle of Pelusium, Persian strategy broke Egyptian defenses. Greek historian Herodotus claimed Cambyses used Egypt's sacred animals as psychological weapons, cats and dogs painted on shields, and live animals driven before the army, forcing Egyptians to retreat rather than harm their sacred symbols. The Egyptians were defeated, Pharaoh Psamtik III captured, and Egypt became a Persian province. Cambyses crowned himself pharaoh, but his rule there was controversial. Egyptian records are sparse, yet Greek sources describe him as cruel and impious, accusing him of mocking gods, burning mummies, and killing the sacred Apis bull. Whether true or exaggerated, his reputation was forever stained. Bardia or the impostor. While Cambyses remained in Egypt, chaos unfolded in Persia. A man claiming to be Bardia, his younger brother, seized power. But the truth was uncertain. Had Cambyses secretly murdered Bardia earlier? So who was this ruler? Many nobles believed him to be Gaumata, a Magian priest who looked strikingly like Bardia. For the people, however, he was a welcome change. He lowered taxes and ended forced military service, earning popular support. The sudden death of Cambyses. Hearing of the usurper, Cambyses set out from Egypt to retake his throne. But in 522 BCE, before he could act, he died. Some sources say from an infected wound, others claim suicide, despairing over his failures. The empire, suddenly leaderless, fell into confusion. The short reign of the false Bardia. The so-called Bardia ruled for several months. To ordinary Persians, his tax relief and reforms were a blessing. But to the Persian nobility he was a threat to tradition and legitimacy. Whispers of his imposture spread, and the great families of Persia prepared to act. The coup of the seven nobles. In September 522 BCE, 7 Persian nobles joined forces to overthrow the false king. They were Otanes, Intafrines, Gobrias, Hydarnes, Megabyzus, Aspathenes, and a young royal guard officer named Darius. The nobles infiltrated the palace. Herodotus tells us the Magian king fought desperately, but the conspirators struck him down. The impostor was dead, and the empire stood on the edge of a new era. Afterward, the nobles debated how Persia should be governed. Some argued for democracy, others for oligarchy. But Darius insisted monarchy was the way of tradition and order. The decision was made Persia would remain a monarchy. According to legend, they agreed that the next king would be he whose horse neighed first at sunrise. Darius' groom tricked his horse by letting it smell a mare beforehand, and so Darius became king. Darius the Great rises. Darius seized the throne not only with force but with faith. On the Behistun inscription, carved into a mountain in western Iran, he declared that Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, had chosen him to destroy the liar Gaumata and restore truth to the empire. His reign would last for decades. He reformed the empire's administration, introduced a uniform tax system, built the famous royal road, and expanded Persian power to its greatest extent. The chaos after Cyrus gave birth to Darius the Great, a ruler who secured the legacy of the Achaemenids. From Cambyses' conquest of Egypt to the shadow of impostors and the bloody coup of the 7 nobles, Persia's throne was won not just by bloodline but by cunning, ambition, and divine claim. Darius' rise out of this chaos ensured that Cyrus' dream of a vast, ordered empire did not collapse, but instead grew stronger than ever. Thank you for watching this episode. In the next episode we go after Darius the Great and changes that he makes and how his genius stabilizes the empire. Don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you don't lose the next episode. When Cyrus the Great built his empire and Cambyses carried it into Egypt, the Achaemenid world was vast but fragile. And then came Darius, remembered in history as Darius the Great. His reign would not only preserve the empire, but give it a structure that would last for centuries. In 522 BCE, Darius seized the throne in a daring coup. But as soon as he placed the crown upon his head, the empire burst into flames. Babylon rose against him. Egypt defied his rule. Media, Elam, and other provinces declared independence. It seemed as if the work of Cyrus was about to collapse. For 2 years the empire was at war with itself. Yet Darius crushed one rebellion after another with both military skill and sheer determination. By the end, the rebellions were silent, and the new king's authority stood unquestioned. But Darius was not content to simply hold power. He wanted to transform the empire into something greater, a system that could outlast any one king. He reorganized the vast lands into satrapies, provinces each ruled by a governor loyal to him, but carefully monitored by royal inspectors known as the king's eyes and ears. Taxes were no longer demanded at random but fixed and fair, calculated for each satrapy. Trade and commerce flourished under a new universal coin, the golden daric, which carried the king's authority across 3 continents. The empire's lifeline was the royal road, stretching nearly 2,700 kilometers from Susa to Sardis. Couriers on horseback could deliver messages across this road in mere days, binding together lands from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. Darius also oversaw grand projects: canals linking the Nile to the Red Sea, new irrigation systems, and monumental cities, including the rising glory of Persepolis. He was shaping not just a realm but a civilization. Yet in the west trouble was brewing. The Greek cities of Ionia, under Persian rule, rebelled in 499 BCE. With the support of Athens and Eretria, the revolt spread into a bitter war. Darius crushed the rebels, but the defiance of Athens burned in his memory. He swore vengeance. In 490 BCE, the Persian army crossed into Greece. Their target was Athens itself. On the plain of Marathon, the great empire faced a small Athenian force. By all logic, the Persians should have triumphed. But in a stunning turn, the Athenians stood firm and delivered a crushing defeat to the great king's army. Marathon became a legend in Greece and a humiliation in Persia. Darius began preparations for an even larger invasion to bring Greece to its knees. But before he could march, death claimed him in 486 BCE. His son Xerxes would inherit the throne, the empire, and the unfinished war with the Greeks. Yet Darius' true legacy went far beyond battles. His monuments still stand. The grand city of Persepolis, the canal linking two seas, and the Behistun inscription carved into the mountainside, where he declared his victories and his right to rule. More than any conqueror before him, Darius built the framework of an empire, one that blended cultures, respected local traditions, and thrived on organization and unity. He was remembered not only as a warrior king, but as the architect of the Persian state. Darius the Great, the man who turned conquest into civilization. Thank you for watching this episode. Next we go after Xerxes and his wars with Greeks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In previous we talked about Darius the Great and his rise and glory. Now let's continue with his son Xerxes. Xerxes and wars with Greeks. Under Xerxes, the son of Darius the Great, the Akhaemenid Empire reached both its height in ambition and one of its most dramatic struggles. Xerxes inherited not only the vast empire but also his father's unfinished war with the Greeks. Darius had sought to punish Athens and its allies for their support of the Ionian revolt, but after his defeat at Marathon, the task fell to his son. Xerxes prepared on a scale that stunned the ancient world. He gathered soldiers from across the empire, from Egypt to India, from Babylon to Anatolia. It is said his army numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and his fleet was one of the largest ever assembled in antiquity. Crossing into Greece required a daring feat of engineering. Xerxes ordered the construction of a massive pontoon bridge across the Hellespont, linking Asia to Europe. He also had canals cut through the peninsula of Mount Athos to allow his fleet safe passage. These efforts showed both his power and determination, but also the vast logistical challenge of leading such a massive force. The campaign began in 480 BCE. The Greeks, though divided, united against the Persian invasion. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass became the stage for one of history's most famous last stands. King Leonidas of Sparta and a small band of warriors held the Persians at bay for days, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the Greek cities. Though Xerxes eventually broke through and advanced, the resistance at Thermopylae became legendary. Afterward, Xerxes marched on Athens, which had been abandoned by its citizens. His army burned the city, fulfilling part of his father's vengeance. Yet the real test came at sea. At Salamis, the smaller Greek fleet, using cunning tactics and knowledge of the narrow waters, trapped and destroyed much of the Persian navy. This was the turning point. Without naval superiority, Xerxes could not maintain his army deep in hostile territory. Xerxes withdrew to Asia, leaving a portion of his forces behind, which were eventually defeated at Plataea and Mycale in 479 BCE. The great expedition, though nearly overwhelming Greece, ended in failure. Despite this setback, the Akhaemenid Empire remained vast and powerful under Xerxes, but his reputation was scarred by the defeat. In the Greek world, the war became a defining moment, the triumph of a small, divided people against the greatest empire of their age. For Persia, it was a reminder that even its immense power had limits. After the death of Xerxes, the Persian Empire entered a period of instability and slow decline. Xerxes' son, Artaxerxes, inherited the throne and faced immediate challenges. Revolts broke out in Egypt, and the rising power of Athens interfered in Persian affairs. Although Artaxerxes managed to restore order and eventually forced peace with the Greeks, the unity and strength of the empire had already begun to weaken. After him came a series of short and violent reigns. Xerxes II ruled only for a few weeks before being murdered. His killer, Sogdianus, was in turn killed by Darius II. This pattern of court intrigues and assassinations became a defining feature of the later Akhaemenid dynasty. Darius II ruled for almost 2 decades, but his reign was marred by corruption, revolts, and increasing dependence on influential court figures. Artaxerxes II succeeded him and became one of the longest-reigning kings, but his time on the throne was full of struggles. He faced constant wars with Sparta, then with Thebes and endless uprisings in Asia Minor and Egypt. The empire, though vast, was losing its grip as Greek influence spread deeper into Persian-controlled lands. Artaxerxes III tried to restore strength with harsh measures. He reconquered Egypt and reasserted Persian authority, but his reign ended with his assassination, a fate shared by many of his successors. By the time Darius III took the throne, the empire was deeply fractured. Nobles and satraps acted with increasing independence, and the royal court was consumed by intrigue. It was in this weakened state that Persia faced its greatest challenge, the invasion of Alexander the Great. In a series of swift campaigns, Alexander defeated Darius' armies, captured the empire's capitals, and finally brought an end to over 2 centuries of Achaemenid rule. The once mighty Persian Empire, built by Cyrus and expanded by Darius and Xerxes, collapsed under the weight of internal decay and external pressure. Yet, its legacy lived on. Its system of administration, culture, and traditions continued to influence the world long after the empire itself had fallen.